Christian parenting.
Aloha, friends! Welcome to the Boy Mom Podcast, powered by Christian Parenting and hosted by my mom, Monica Swanson. On the Boy Mom Podcast, it is our goal to provide you with practical advice and biblical wisdom for raising boys in this sometimes crazy world. You can find show notes for the podcast over at monicaswanson.com/podcast. We're so glad you're here.
The preparation of Advent is both the remembering that people were preparing and waiting for the Christ child and that he came, and then also the current waiting and preparation that we're experiencing today for his return. And so it's like this history echoed and reflected in today. And it is as if all believers had that same hope and anticipation. And not even from Christ's time, before that, when people were waiting for his first arrival. So it's an universal experience.
Hey friends, how are you doing? I want to say a mele kaliki maka here from the north shore of Oahu in Hawaii, where it is still sunny and 80 degrees, but we are pretending well. We've got the AC cranking, I've got Christmas music playing, candles lit, and we are fully in the holiday mode here. So guys, you are just listening to the voice of Alexandra Kuykendall, and I'm so happy to get to share this interview with you because I believe it could be a game changer in your holiday season. If you're like me and sometimes feel like maybe you're the only one that struggles in different ways in the holidays, either you just feel like you can't get your act together or like you're not enjoying things as much as you should, whether you feel a little guilty because you let stress get in the way of all the fun and joyful, holy holiday moments, you're not alone. And we are going to be drawing from a book that has been so inspiring me this season that Alex wrote called Loving Your Actual Christmas. And I just hope you can all get your hands on that book. But regardless, the things that Alex shares today will inspire you, make you feel a whole lot less alone, and I think just be super encouraging for all of us. So I can't wait to share this conversation. Guys, I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this podcast in such a busy season. I know you've got options for so many different podcasts out there. So I appreciate that you choose to listen to the Boy Mom podcast. And whether you are out for a walk in some cool winter air, maybe wrapping presents, maybe baking, whatever you're doing, I hope you feel like I'm hanging out with you. And I sure wish I could hang out with you, but I do love to get to know you regardless. So if you've never introduced yourself, would you do that? I love to hear from you. If you want to email me, and you're welcome to share topic requests for future episodes, anything you like, you can do all of that by emailing me at aloha@monicaswanson.com. Again, aloha@monicaswanson.com. Also, have we hung out on Instagram yet? Please follow me over there and definitely say hi. Tell me you listen to the podcast. I love hearing from you, and you can do that on Instagram at @MonicaSwanson_. Again, MonicaSwanson_. So be sure to say hi. I love to get to know you guys. I want to thank you again for just sharing this podcast with your friends and family as this community continues to grow. I know it's because of word of mouth and all of you. So I want to thank you for that. And now I want to let you just dive in and listen to this awesome interview. I'll have a few final words to say at the end, but without further ado, here's Alexandra Kuykendall and I talking about what it means to love your actual Christmas. I hope you enjoy. All right, aloha, Alex. Welcome to the Boy Mom Podcast.
Well, that does sound funny. I'm going to admit, I never thought
And
I'd
why
get
is
an
that?
invitation. Well, I'm
Yeah.
your opposite. In
That's
that
right.
I
Tell
have
us.
4 daughters,
Yes.
and I've never been
So who would have
invited
thunk?
to be on any boy anything. Right.
Well, welcome. I'm
Thank
glad you're
you.
here.
Thank you. But, fun fact, I did think I would be a mom of all boys. Like
Oh,
if I had predicted, that's what I would
yeah.
have predicted.
Interesting. And how's it going?
Going okay. It's going okay.
Your
We're
girls are athletes, right? I'll bet they're so cool.
They are very fun. They are not loving quarantine life.
Yeah, I
So
understand.
we have been on virtual
Mhm.
school since March. So
Rough
my kids are
times.
here at home while I'm recording,
Mm.
and I have a senior in high school. It's just so disappointing and
Yeah, it
hard. And trying to make
is.
decisions about next year is really stressful.
Oh,
And I have a
yeah,
freshman in high school, and it's a
that's hard.
bummy way to start high school. So the
It
two younger ones are
is.
okay, but the older ones,
Yeah, there's certain life seasons that this has to affect more significantly. Well, now that we're already getting into that, can you just give an official introduction? Tell
oh,
everybody
sure.
who you are, where you are, and what you do.
Well, I live in Denver, right near downtown. We live in the city. My husband runs a ministry that offers transitional housing. So that's kind of long term emergency housing for people coming out of homelessness, mostly because of domestic violence or addiction recovery. We love living in the neighborhood and being part of city life. And I, with my friend Krista, run the Open Door Sisterhood. We have a podcast like you, and we run mastermind retreats. And we've started doing some online stuff because COVID, forces creativity, which we're happy about. We're finding some ways to connect with people in smaller groups online. And I have written a number of books. So,
Well, tell us the titles of your books.
well, my first book is titled The Artist's Daughter, and it's a
Hmm.
memoir.
Yeah.
And I wrote that when I was on staff with MOPS International a few years ago. It came out about 10
Hmm.
years ago. That's a
All
long time
right.
ago. No,
Yeah.
eight. You know
Okay.
how I'm remembering
Still
based on the age of my
of your
youngest child.
kids.
Yeah, right.
Sure. Hmm.
She was a toddler. Okay, so then Loving My Actual Life, which is probably my
Hmm.
most well-known book. Loving My
Hmm.
Actual Christmas, we're going to talk about
Hmm.
today.
Yes.
And Loving My Actual Neighbor is my most recent book that came out a year and a half ago.
Which I love.
Oh,
That was the
thank you.
first book of yours that I read, and I just loved it so much that I think I wanna have you back on in the new year to talk about that. But today we get to talk about Christmas,
Mhm.
and I'm so excited. I
Yeah.
am walking through your book. Now, I did kind of skim ahead a little bit, but really, I'm walking through this book, day by day with you. And guys, I hope you have this book. And if not, get a copy for now or to save for next year. But Loving My Actual Christmas, and experiment in relishing the season. I just can't even tell you how much comfort it's bringing me to be reading through this each day with you. I feel like you're me. Like maybe most moms share in so many of the things that you walk through, but we feel like we're the only ones. And so, tell us a little bit more about it before we dive in. Like, what was going on that made you write it? What was happening in your life?
Mm. Well, I mentioned Loving My Actual Life was a book I wrote that a lot of people really resonated with. It's just kind of about everyday mothering, contentment in the midst of doing the same thing over and over and over again. And when I would go speak to moms groups and MOPS groups, I would often hear people say, "Oh, yes, I want that. I want that." But there's this one time of year where I know it's impossible, and that's Christmas. And it just kind of felt funny. Like, is it impossible to live our lives over Christmas? I mean, I know I've had some really miserable Christmases
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
I've been exhausted
Yeah.
with trying to make it magical for everyone
Hmm.
and hosting people and just being the Christmas orchestrator. And I thought, what if we just looked at this one little season of leading up to and then enjoying Christmas and added a little bit of intention to it?
Hmm.
So you and I were just talking before we started recording about publishing. So I was under contract for this book, and then it became really evident that my stepdad was dying as I was starting to write the book and think about the book. So it ended up that he died a few months before the Christmas season of when I actually did the experiment. And so a lot of what I talk about is grief during the holidays. And what I heard when I would hear people talking about why the holidays were hard, part of it was just the busyness and
Hmm.
stress, but also the financial stress that a lot of people
Hmm.
feel, extra
Yeah.
costs and travel and all of that.
Yeah.
But a lot of it had to do with somebody that was missing. And, if we think about Christmas, it is an annual marker. So picture where you were a year ago on Christmas Day. I think everybody who's listening knows exactly where they were. We can't say that
That's
about
right.
many days in
Yes, you're right.
2019. But we know where
Yes.
we were on Christmas Day
Mhm.
2019. And as we're approaching Christmas Day 2020, we are thinking about all the year that has happened. Now, on a normal year, there's going to be some highs, some lows, maybe some big life events that were celebrations, new baby, a marriage, maybe some grief. But for this particular year that we are entering into, I think it's especially interesting to be talking about this idea of loving our actual Christmas
Mm.
because all of us have had to live in circumstances that we did not ask for and we did not expect, right? And for some people, it's incredibly dramatic. For other people, like me, my kids have been home, and for sure, we've been impacted by this pandemic life, but it's nothing like people who have lost somebody. I learned as I was talking to people before I started writing the book that grief is just a big part of Christmas because all of the things that pain us throughout the year feel especially painful during the
Mm.
Christmas season.
Mhm.
So think about what is your biggest stress? If you're stressed about time,
Mhm.
Christmas is usually, maybe not this year, but usually a much busier season and you feel
Yeah.
crunched and you're trying to get a lot more done. If it's money, money feels tighter over the holidays.
Mhm.
And then if it's relationships, either because somebody is missing or because of a strained relationship or conflict in your extended family, the holidays tend to be when we gather with people that we're able to avoid all year long
Yeah. Right.
for good
So true.
reasons
So
sometimes.
true.
And
So true.
and maybe this year you're getting a pass on that. Maybe you're getting an excuse not to have a big extended family gathering if that's stressful for you.
Mhm.
But it just is a time where we often are looking at our lives because it is that annual marker and considering in the last year, the life that happened either was what I was hoping for or it
Mm.
wasn't.
Mm.
And so the disappointment can feel that much more poignant. Not to mention, there's things like the Hallmark Channel that tell us that Christmas is supposed to be this magical experience. So if you're feeling broke and depressed and
Mm.
hungover, guess what? That
Mm.
doesn't really fit into the
Mm-mm.
narrative of what
Mm-mm.
Christmas
Mm.
is supposed to feel like. And
Mm.
yet, I think that
Mhm.
the more broke, the more hungover, the more stressed and depressed you are, the better the news that Jesus came.
Oh.
It
Oh.
just he came for the brokenhearted. He didn't
Yeah.
come for people who bank accounts feel nice and safe. He didn't come for people who have it all together, whether it appears or not that they actually do have it all together. I don't know if there are any
Right.
people like
Yeah.
that, but
Right.
um,
Yes.
he came for the brokenhearted. And so the more
Yes.
brokenhearted you're feeling this season, just know that Jesus is tender and close to you in a way that he might not be if you weren't in as much pain.
Mm. Oh, Alex, it's beautiful. That is so, so important. And as I've read through the Gospels this fall and even watched the Chosen series, which I haven't mentioned on the podcast, but that has been such a visible reminder to me that Jesus is so often just coming in and reminds you that that's exactly what he's here for. He's here for the broken, he's here for the hurt. And I think we often just think we need to get ourselves together, that we want to come to him when everything's right. But I love your reminder that it's exactly the opposite, that he truly is here for that very purpose. And hopefully we can embrace all the more than the broken parts of us as we receive him into our Christmas season and make that the center, make that what it's all about. So wow, that is beautiful, and that's what I found through the pages of your book that I love so much, so
Mm,
thank you so much for sharing your heart in it, and I imagine as you wrote it then, you saw that God was doing something completely different than you originally thought, because you could walk through these pages and really connect with the people who are hurting in the season,
mhm.
and that's what your actual Christmas was even as you wrote the book, right?
Right. So I did, just like I did with loving my actual life, I did a little experiment and I just journaled every day things that came up in my life, whether they were thoughts I had or things that happened in our family. And then I went back through them and I picked out highlights that I thought this tells a a story of
Yeah.
my journey during this season.
Mm.
And so there was a
Mm.
lot. Obviously, I couldn't write about every single thing that happened over Advent and Christmastide during that one particular season, but I picked out the things that I thought showed the state of my heart and the change of my mindset, because that's what Advent is intended for. Advent is a time of really
Mhm.
preparation. I
Yeah.
think of Mary being pregnant, and you and I have been pregnant a number of times, and that idea of preparation, and we are preparing our hearts just like God was preparing the baby in her womb to come. And so, what does it take to prepare our hearts for this good news? It's the preparation of Advent is both the remembering that people were preparing and waiting for the Christ child and that he came. And then also the current waiting and preparation that
Mm.
we're experiencing today for his
Mm.
return. And so
Yes.
it's like this history echoed and
Mm.
reflected in today. And it
Mm.
is as if all believers from Christ's time forward had that same hope and anticipation. And not even from Christ's time, before that, when people were waiting for his first arrival. So it's an universal
Mm.
experience.
Yes.
And so that's how I chose what I selected. And some of the
I
things
love
are
it.
really dumb, like really
No,
dumb
they're
about
no,
Christmas.
they're
I don't want you people to think
no.
it's all super deep. It's not. Some
No.
of it's
Well,
really
and
dumb.
that's what I love is that I feel so normal. Like you make me feel like I'm not alone. And yet the things you highlight are they're funny. I have laughed out loud many times already. They are real. They're raw, they're honest, and yet like you said, you're clearly teaching lessons in these pages because what you were learning as you went through your experiment. And then what I also love is how there's little areas that point to the section that comes later in the book, which is making your actual Christmas work. And this, my friends, I'm all about practical. And I love that I get to be a part of your story and walk through the days. Literally, I'm like, oh, it's Tuesday. I get to read what Alex did on Tuesday, or it's Wednesday. But then there will be a little mention with a circle pointing you to the page where you can read more about things like I'm just going to open it like finances, a whole section that gets really practical about finances. Reduce, reuse, recycle, gift giving on a budget. I love that. Relationships, you get practical at the back of the book about relationships, bringing families together, navigating extended family relationships, and just the logistics. So I think that there are, it's a fun way to read a story, to have some fun, to feel like a friend is walking through it with you, but also to get to learn the lessons you learned. And maybe you're saving some of us some hard lessons by what you went through and what you've learned. So I really love that. So this is airing in the middle of December. You and I are talking, and for those that don't have the book, now I'm assuming that there's Kindle version available, is
Yeah.
there
Oh,
or
yeah.
not? Yeah,
Hmm.
okay. So people can grab it today and get caught up. It's
Hmm.
not a long book. So guys, if you're anxious to feel like a friend is walking through this with you, I encourage you to grab the Kindle version and also order it because it's just so pretty. I love all your covers are just so they just are
Oh,
make my heart happy. But let's jump in now and talk a little bit practically about what we can do because I will confess that most Decembers I start off with great intentions
hmm.
and it's not going to be like last year and I know you say this in the book about yourself. So I was with you there with those tangled up Christmas lights saying it's not going to be like this next year. But by the end of the holiday, I'm often the one standing there going, when did it happen? When did I lose the focus? When did I get caught up? When did I start to literally wake up in the night stressed out about gifts and who I forgot and what's not in the mail yet? Like, it's just not what it's supposed to be about. And so, if we're halfway through the month as this airs, I would love for you to give us some advice so that we can avoid those last few weeks of getting crazy. Can you offer? And then also, Christmas tide.
Hmm.
I want to talk about how you approach that part of Christmas. So dive in for us.
Yeah. Well, I did realize as I was writing the book that for me, I kind of treat the 25th as like the big day, right? Everything leads up to the
Totally.
25th, and all the fun activities, they have to happen before. This is all in my mind. This is not
Yes,
truth.
yes.
that I'm speaking.
No,
It's
but
what's in my mind.
yes.
That everything that is fun has to happen before the 25th. And so what happens is we try to cram it all in, like, I just wanna clench my teeth, like, we're gonna have some fun, and we're gonna bake all the cookies, and we're gonna eat all the food, and of course, all the presents, um,
Yes.
and then on the 26th, collapse, often being sick,
Yeah.
like, physically sick
Yes,
because I'm so
physically.
exhausted.
Yes, and
Um,
kids are depressed because they think all the fun is over, and now you're gonna be a mean mom and make them clean the house.
right, and you probably will be because you're exhausted.
Yes. Yes.
So
Oh.
when I was looking at Advent, I was paying attention to this season of Christmas or Christmastide in the church calendar because Advent is a season, if you're not familiar with the church calendar, it's the season in the church calendar, the 4 Sundays leading up to Christmas Eve and ends on Christmas Eve when the Christ child arrives. And then this actual season of Christmas starts on the 25th and it's 12 days long and goes to Epiphany. And I thought, okay,
That is
this,
so amazing. Okay, I was vaguely familiar with this,
yeah.
but you're saying the season of Christmas officially begins on the 25th
Yes.
and
Yes.
goes for 12 days.
Yes.
Okay, this is
Walmart does not tell
life-changing.
us this. Walmart says
No,
Christmas starts in October and
right.
ends on, like, the 23rd. They're already putting stuff on sale, right?
Right.
Um,
Yes.
so the 25th, we have these 12 days, and on a typical year, my kids would go back to school maybe the 1st or 2nd week of January. We would have this quiet downtime. All the sports would typically be canceled because everybody's trying to cram everything in before the 25th. There aren't a lot of parties, there aren't a lot of concerts. And so there was just this kind of quiet time. And I thought, how do we maximize this as a family? And maybe it's just building in quiet. And so one thing I started that year was just blocking off a couple days where we were officially doing nothing. And
Mm,
we could be in
that's
our pajamas
wonderful.
all day. Now, I will say, COVID life, we've been
Yeah,
doing
we've been
nothing
doing
for 9
we've had
months.
enough of that.
We have had enough of it. So it's not gonna be quite as enticing as it is in a typical season. But if you're listening to this now and you're thinking about next year already, just be thinking about that. But it is this sense that Christmas is worth 12 days of celebration and that the church marks that out, and that we are used to it being just one big day and all of the prep leading up to it. So if you think about your celebration being 12 days long, it takes the pressure off of the 25th, for
Yeah.
one.
Mhm.
But it also is like, wait a minute, this is like a whole thing because the God of the universe came. And so it kind of deserves, I get a day for my birthday. He should get more than I should. Like it just,
Yeah.
in the grand scheme of things, it makes sense that he would
Right.
get 12 days of celebration.
Yes, yes.
So I just really tried to incorporate that in. So on the 15th, we're looking at what needs to happen between now and the 25th. Well, what special meals are gonna happen on the 24th, on the 25th? What can you be doing now on the 16th and
Mm,
17th to
mhm,
make the 24th more enjoyable so that you're not staying up
mhm,
until 3 o'clock in the morning wrapping
mm,
presents?
mhm,
I
mhm.
have done that. And
Uh-huh, yeah.
then my kids get up at, 4:30, so that 1 hour of sleep is
Right.
not, sufficient. So just be thinking about and maybe
Mm,
write down all of the
mhm,
tasks that you as the Christmas orchestrator need to do between the 15th and the 25th, and
mhm.
then assign them to days. It's, not rocket
Yep.
science, but
No, but
it will help
we
you.
don't do it.
Right, but we
Yes,
don't do it.
yes.
So things like grocery shopping and all of that.
And
And
by
then
the way, I just love that term, the Christmas orchestrator. I've that was new to me, and I'm like, "You know what? That is so spot on." So
yes.
good.
Right, and that is what we are as moms. We're
We are.
making the magic happen, and that can feel
Yes, we
like a
are.
lot of pressure.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
and to remember, we don't have to compete in the magic department. Jesus wins. Like he is
Mm,
a miracle of all miracles, that God so loved the world that he came. So we don't really need to compete in that arena. He's won.
mm. I love
So
it.
just take some of that pressure off yourself. Now, you wanna have some good memories, you wanna have some fun. Here's one thing that I wanna say is this year may be the year of tweaking traditions because
Ooh, why not?
we kind of talked about this when you were on the Open Door Sisterhood podcast around
Mm,
graduation. Like,
Yes.
we did an episode on graduation this last year and how it was different and how to
Mhm.
make it special even
Mhm.
though it was different. And you were our expert guest.
Mm.
Um, and so really we need to approach Christmas that way too. And maybe by now on the 15th, you've decided how you're going to tweak some things. But if you're thinking, I just couldn't do that. I didn't even schedule that one particular activity because it was impossible to do during COVID restrictions. Think instead, what is the spirit behind that? How did I want my people to feel as the Christmas orchestrator? How can I create that feeling or that spirit of generosity or of appreciating music, whatever it is, whatever value you were trying to reinforce for your family by having that tradition, how can you tweak it this year?
I love it.
And so,
So
I
good.
just wanna encourage people to think about that for the next
Yeah, I
not
love
just
it.
to the 25th, but on into
Yeah,
Christmas.
so can you tell us more about those 12 days of Christmas? Some creative ways people have or you have done things? Any advice on that?
I don't really have any, but I can say, I
I
normally tell
don't
people
believe
to
you.
relax, and again,
Yeah,
fear of COVID,
right.
maybe we're all done relaxing. Um,
Right.
I will
Okay,
s
but I growing up, I'm remembering that though I didn't really understand the heart of it, I was too young, but there was at least one year where my mom did something where she had gifts under the tree that were marked for the 12 days following Christmas. So I think she had something good going there.
yeah,
And I loved it as a kid because instead of the disappointment, and I know my 10-year-old, he's a real gift boy. And when all the gifts are open, there's kind of this, "Aw, like, dang, it's over," in his mind. And all the talk in the world about Jesus might help a little, but, he's still thinking about just the fun of opening something. And so to have some little gifts, I don't know this year, I'm really trying not to do many little gifts this year because 'cause I'm doing most of my shopping online, and I'm not gonna be at, the dollar store to buy little junk. But perhaps instead of giving all your gifts on Christmas, some of them could be spread out in the days following.
mhm.
That's an idea?
Oh, right, and think about advent calendars. If you've been on Pinterest or on Instagram, you've seen moms who have maybe done an activity every day during Advent, and you're thinking,
Mhm.
it's December 15th and I missed that boat." This
Right.
this is a way
Yeah,
for you to take
that's
that
me.
spirit of continuing the Christmas cheer day by day in bite-sized pieces. I do think it's a time for families to be together. So to be thinking about activities, maybe instead of gifts, what is an activity we can do? It
So
may be
good.
limited because
Yep.
of everything, but,
Right.
mix it up. I mean, my family is so sick of being together. So what can we do? Because we really
Right.
have been together for 9 months. My husband's been working
Yeah,
from
yeah.
home, and my kids have been home. So what can we do that feels different and special, given the fact that we still are living within some restrictions?
Right. No, I love that. And I think for my kids, even things like going for a walk after dinner is always fun, but we don't do it super often. It's just something you have to be intentional about. So I know where you live is cold, but I'm thinking bundle up and say, but if you mark it on the calendar and say, "Hey, on the 27th, we're all gonna do this," and it's almost like makes it a thing, even though it's just a walk, but something you can do as a family that's special, each day, I think is really neat, and it kinda just keeps the magic going, and if you can find ways to serve others, on this day, we're all gonna bring a meal to somebody who's stuck at home, and do a little carol or a song or a blessing for that person. So I think even this, we can circle back to episode 82 with your partner, Krista Gilbert, where we are talking about Thanksgiving and being grateful. And a lot of that had to do with serving others. And so we can just, and my whole point of that episode was I wanted to talk about things we could do not only through the holidays, but in the new year. So
Mhm,
I love that we could use some of those ideas in the days following Christmas. So good.
because we can say, I think with confidence, that 2021 is a new year. And so, some of what we can do as a family during those 12 days is to be thinking about the things that we are looking forward to
Mhm.
and grieving the things that we've missed this year. But I think a lot of us have done a lot of grieving. And maybe it's time to be asking God, where can we be serving you in this world in this new year. And so maybe some of that planning could be
Yeah.
something that you do together as a family.
I love that. That is good. Okay, well, Alex, thank you for all of that encouragement. And again, I hope people can all read your book and walk through this with you and feel like they've got a new friend in you. Where can people find you right now if they just want to track you down, find you on social media, or listen to your podcast? Can you share again all the places people can find you?
Yeah, the podcast is called The Open Door Sisterhood. So we're on iTunes, or you can go to our website and listen there. My website is alexandrakuykendall.com. And I do have, if you go to the tab that is connected to this Christmas book, I do have some downloads that are just like planning forms and that kind of stuff.
Mm,
It
yay.
may be a little late for some of those for the year, but it also has a Bible study that accompanies the book that you can download that really is more scripture focused. The book is a little more practical focused as far as
Hmm.
it talks about my own faith journey, but it isn't so Bible study-y. Um,
Right.
so you
Love
can
it.
get a Bible study on my website that you could download.
So good. I have to hop in there because I meant to do this when we first got on, but we got so carried away quickly into chit chatting. But I wanted to say your name, and I always
Oh yeah.
hesitate because I feel like I'm saying it wrong because of the spelling. It's Alexandra Kuykendall, and
Mhm,
you say Kirkendall, but it is spelled
mhm.
Kuykendall. Can you tell us a little about how that where that name comes from? I'm so
Yes.
curious.
Well, I was impressed that you pronounced it correctly before we started recording, and then I remembered that you're in Hawaii, and usually,
Yes.
if you're from the United States, you pronounce it correctly if you're from Houston, because there's a big street that is pronounced that way,
Oh.
that's spelled that way in Houston,
Oh,
and then
okay.
there is a building at the University of Hawaii that is
Hmm.
spelled that
I'm
way,
so
pronounced that.
curious where
It
that
is
came from.
yes, it is Dutch in origin, and
Okay.
apparently UY, that combination in
Uh-huh.
Dutch is pronounced ear, so I think it's more like
Okay.
Kierkendahl when you're
Ah,
in Dutch-speaking
okay.
countries. I married
There we
into it.
go.
Yeah,
There
it
you
my last
go. It
name
happens.
used to be really easy, and this is not. It's just long and complicated.
But it's so fun. I love it. I like saying it.
Mm.
Okay, well, Alexander Kirkendall,
Uh-huh.
thank you so much. I have been so encouraged by you and your book, and I would love to have you back on to talk about your other books and the things you're working on now. So just appreciate your time today.
Oh, thank you. Merry Christmas.
Mele kaliki maka.
Oh, that's right.
Have a great rest of your season. God bless you. Aloha. Okay, friends, I hope you enjoyed that conversation. And as always, you will find links to anything that Alex and I talked about over in show notes at monicaswanson.com/podcast. And this is episode 85. Wow, we're getting up there, aren't we? If you haven't left a rating or review yet, I would sure love it if you do that. And you know what? You can do it right there on your phone. If it's in your hand, when this thing's done, just scroll right on down on this podcast and you'll see those 5 stars. You can tap on those. And if you have a minute, you can leave a few words about what you love most about the Boy Mom podcast. I will be encouraged, I promise. And here's the thing, it's going to give you a funny name in your review. So if you want me to know who you are, feel free to write your name in your review. If it's an Instagram name, I'll shout you out on Instagram, but at least I'll know who I can thank for a kind review. Okay, guys, times are busy, so you get back to everything you have ahead of you for this holiday season. And I hope that the words that Alex shared inspire you to maybe shift your perspective a little bit as you do. And I wish you all the best. I'll be back next week with a very special Christmas episode, so don't miss it. You might want to bring your kids around for that one. You'll see why. But I want to thank you for being here today. God bless you, Mele Kaliki Maka. And until next week, aloha.